Chapter 31. The third task. Dumbledore reckon you know who's again as well. Ron whispered, getting stronger. Everything Harry had seen in the pensive, nearly everything Dumbledore had told show him afterward, he had now shared with Ron and Hermione. And of course, with Cyrus, to whom Harry had sent an owl the moment he had left Dumbledore's office. Harry, Ron, and Hermione sat up late in the common room once again that night, talking it all over until Harry's mind was reeling, until he understood what Dumbledore had meant about the head become so full of thought that he would have been a relief of siphon them off. Ron stared into the common room fire. Harry thought he saw Ron silver slightly, even though the evening was warm, and he trusts Snape. Ron said he really trusts Snape, even though he knows he was the Death Eater. Yes, said Harry. Hermione had not spoken for 10 minutes. She was sitting with her forehead in her hand, staring at her knees. Harry thought she looked as though she could have done with pensive. Rita Skeeter, she muttered finally. How can you be worrying about her now? Said Ron in utter disbelief. I'm not worrying about her, Hermione said to her niece. I'm just thinking. Remember what she said to me in Three Broomsticks. I know things about Ludo Bedman that would make your hair curl. This is what she meant, isn't it? She reported this trial. She knew he had passed information to the Death Eaters. And Winky, remember Ludo Bedman's a bad wizard. Mr. Crouch could have been furious to get off. He would have talked about it at home. Yeah, but Bedman didn't pass information on purpose, did he? Hermione shrugged. And first reckoned Madame Maxim attacked Crouch. Ron said, turning back to Harry. Yeah, said Harry, but he is only saying that because Crouch disappeared near the Buck's bottom carriage. We never thought of her, did we? Said Ron slowly. Mind you, she definitely got giant blood and she doesn't want to admit it. Of course she doesn't, said Hermione sharply, looking up. Look what happened to Hagrid when Rita found out about his mother. Look at Fudge jumping to conclusion about her just because she is part giant. Who had need that sort of prejudice? I had probably say I had big bones or if I knew that's what I had get for telling the truth. Hermione looked at her watch. We haven't done any practicing, she said, looking shocked. If we are going to do the impediment first, we'll have to really get down to it tomorrow. Come on, Harry, you need to get some sleep. Harry and Ron went slowly upstairs to their dormitory. As Harry pulled on his pajama, he looked over at Neville's bed. True to his word to Dumbledore, he had not told Ron and Hermione about Neville's parents. As Harry took off his glasses and climbed into the four-poster, he imagined how it must feel to have parents still living but unable to recognize you. He often got sympathy from strangers for being an orphan, but as he listened to Neville's snores, he thought that Neville deserved it more than he did. Lying in the darkness, Harry felt a rush of anger and hate toward the people who had tortured Mr. and Mrs. Longbottom. He remembered the jeer of the crowd as Crouch's son and his companions had been dragged from the court by the Dementor. He understood how they had felt. Then he remembered the milk-white face of the screaming boy and realized with a jolt that he had died a year later. It was Voldemort, Harry thought, staring up at the canopy of his bed in the darkness. It can come back to Voldemort. He was the one who had torn these families apart, who had ruined all these lives. Ron and Hermione were supported to be studying for their exams, which would finish on the day of the third task, but they were putting most of their efforts into helping Harry prepare. Don't worry about it, Hermione said shortly when Harry pointed his out to them, and she said he didn't mind practicing on his own for a while. At last, well, get top marks in defense against the dark arts. We had never had found about all these hexes in class. Good training for when we are all ours, said Ron excitedly, attempting the impediment curse on a wasp that had burst into the room and making it stop dead in midair. The mood in the castle as they entered June became excited and tense again. Everyone was looking forward to the third task, which will take place a week before the end of term. Harry was practicing excess at every available moment. He felt more confident about the task than either of the others. Difficult and dangerous, though it would undoubtedly be. Moody was right. Harry had managed to find his way past monstrous creature and enchanted barrier before now, and this time he had some notice, some chance to prepare himself for what lay ahead. But walking in, Harry, Hermione, and Ron all over the school, Professor McGonagall had given them permission to use the empty Transfiguration classroom at lunchtime. Harry had soon mastered the impediment curse, a spell to slow down and obstruct attackers, the reductor curse, which would enable him to blast solid object out of his way, and the 4-point spell, a useful discovery of harmonies that would make his wand point due to north, therefore enabling him to check whether he was going in the right direction within the maze. He was still having trouble with the shield charm through though this was supposed to cast a temporary invisible wall around himself and deflated minor curses. Hermione managed to shatter it with a well-placed jelly-flake jinx, and Harry walked around the room for 10 minutes afterward before she had looked up the counter jinx. "You are still doing really well, though," Hermione said, looking down a list and crossing off those spells they had already learned. "Some of these are bound to come in handy. Come and look at this," said Ron, who was standing by the window. He was staring down onto the ground. "What Malfoy is doing." Harry and Hermione went to see Malfoy. Grab and Goyle were standing in the shadow of the tree below. Grab and Goyle seemed to be keeping a lookout. Both were smirking. Malfoy was holding his hand up to his mouth and speaking into it. "He looked like he is using a walkie-talkie," and said Harry curiously. "He can't be," said Hermione. "I have told you, those sort of things don't work around Hogwarts." "Come on, Harry," she added briskly, turning away from the window and moving back into the middle of the room. "Let's try that shield charm again." Cyrus was sending daily owls now, like Hermione. He seemed to want to concentrate on getting Harry through the last task before they concerned themselves with anything else. He reminded Harry in every letter that whatever might be going on outside the walls of Hogwarts was not Harry's responsibility, nor was it within his power to influence it. "If Voldemort is really getting stronger again," he wrote, "my priority is to ensure your safety. He cannot hope to lay hands on you while you are under Dumbledore's protection. But all the same, take no risk. Concentrate on getting through that maze safely, and then we can turn our attention to other matters." Harry's nerve mounted as June the 24th drew closer, but they were not as bad as those he had felt before the first and second task. For one thing, he was confident that this time he had done everything in his power to prepare for the task. For another, this was final hurdle, and however well or badly he did, the tournament would at least be over, which would be enormous relief. Breakfast was a very noisy affair at the Gryffindor's table on the morning of the third task. Fast Owl appeared, bringing Harry a good luck card from Cyrus. It was only a piece of parchment, folded over and bearing a puddy paw print on its front. But Harry appreciated it all the same. I Screech Owl arrived for Hermione, carrying her morning copy of the Daily Prophet as usual. She unfolded the paper, glanced at the front page, and spat out a mouthful of pumpkin juice all over it. "What?" said Harry and Ron together, staring at her. Nothing, said Hermione quickly, trying to solve the paper out of sight, but Ron grabbed it. He stared at the headline and said, "No way. Not today. That old cow." "What?" said Harry. "Rita Skeeter again." "No," said Ron. And just like Hermione, he attempted to push the paper out of sight. "About me, isn't it?" said Harry. "No," said Ron in an entirely unconvincing note. But before Harry could demand to see the paper, Draco Malfoy shouted across the great hall from the Slytherin table. "Hey Potter! Potter, how's your head? You feeling alright? Sure you are not going to go brisk on us?" Malfoy was holding a copy of Daily Prophet too, slithering up and down the table where sniggering, twinkling in their seat to see Harry's reaction. "Let me see it," Harry said to Ron. "Give it here." Very reluctantly, Ron handed over the newspaper. Harry turned it over and found himself staring at his own picture beneath the banner headline, "Harry Potter, Disturbed and Dangerous. The boy who defeated he who must not be named is unstable and possibly dangerous," write Rita Skeeter, specially correspondent. "Alarming evidence has recently come to the light about Harry Potter's strange behavior, which casts doubt about his sustainability to compete in demanding competition like the Triwizardry Tournament or even to attend Hogwarts School. Potter, the Daily Prophet, can exclusively reveal regularly collapse at school and is often heard to complain of pain in the scar on the forehead, relic of the curse which you know who attempt to kill him. On Monday last, midway through the deviation lesson, your Daily Prophet reporter witnessed Potter storming from the class, claiming that his scar was hurting too badly to continue studying. It is possibly, say, top expert at St. Mango's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries, that Potter's brain was affected by attack inflicted upon him by you know who, and that insistence that the scar is still hurting is an expression of the deep station confusion. "He might even be pretending," said one specialist. "This could be the plea of attention." The Daily Prophet, however, was unearthed worrying fact about Harry Potter that Albus Dumbledore, headmaster of Hogwarts, has carefully concealed from the wizarding public. "Potter can speak Parseltongue," revealed Draco Malfoy, a Hogwarts fourth year. "There were a lot of attacks on students a couple of years ago, and most people thought Potter was behind them after they saw him lose his temper at dueling club and set a snake on other boy. It was all hush up though, but he made friends with werewolf and giant too. We think he had do anything for a bit of power. Parseltongue, the ability to converse with snake, has long been considered a dark art. Indeed, the most famous Parselmouth of our time is none other than you know who himself, a member of the Dark Force Defense League, who wished to remain unnamed, stated that he would regard any wizard who could speak Parseltongue as worth of investigation. Personally, I would be highly suspicious of anybody who could converse with snake, as serpents are often used for working of magic, dark magic, and are historically associated with evil doors. Similarly, anyone who seeks out of the company of such vicious creatures as a werewolf and giants would appear to have a fondness for evidence. Albus Dumbledore should surely consider whether a boy such as this should be allowed to compete in the Triwizardry Tournament. Some fear that Potter might resort to the dark art in the depreciation to win the tournament. "The third task of which take place this evening gone off me a bit, hasn't she?" said Harry lightly, folding up the paper over at the Slytherin table. Malfoy, Crabbe and Goyle were laughing at him, tapping their heads with their finger, pulling grotesquely mad face, and waggling their tongue like snake. "How did she know your scar hurt in deviation?" Ron said, "There is no way she was there. There is no way she could have heard." "The window was open," said Harry. "I opened it to breathe." "You were at the top of North Tower," Hermione said. "Your voice couldn't have carried all the way down at the ground. Well, you are the one who is supposed to be researching magical method of bugging, said Harry. You tell me how she did it. I have been trying, said Hermione, but an odd, dreamy expression suddenly came over Hermione's face. She slowly raised her hand and ran her finger through her ear. Are you all right? Said Ron, frowning at her. Yes, said Hermione breathlessly. She ran her finger through her hair again and then held her hand up to her mouth as though speaking into an invisible walkie-talkie. Harry and Ron stared at each other. I have had an idea, Hermione said, gazing into space. I think I know because then no one would be able to see, even Moody, and she had have been able to get out the window leave. But she is not allowed. She definitely not allowed. I think we have got her. Just give me 2 seconds in the library just to make sure. With that, Hermione seized her school bag and dashed out of the great hall. Oi! Ron called after her. We have got out our history of magic exam in 10 minutes, Blimey, he said, turning back to Harry. She must really hate the Skeeter woman to risk missing the start of an exam. What are you going to do in a Bin's class? Read again. Exempt from the end-term test as a Travisard champion, Harry had been sitting in the back of the every exam class so far looking up fresh hexes for the third task. Suppose so, Harry said Ron, but just then Professor McGonagall came walking alongside the Gryffindor table toward him. Potter, the champion, are congregating in the chamber hall of the hall after breakfast, she said, but the task not till tonight, said Harry, accidentally spilling scrambled egg down his front, afraid he had mistaken time. I'm aware of that, Potter, she said. The champion families are invited to watch the final task. You know, this is simply a chance for you to greet them. She moved away. Harry gaped after her. She doesn't expect the Dursley corner, does she? Asked Ron blankly. Don't know, said Ron. Harry, I had better hurry. I'm going to be late for things. See you later. Harry finished his breakfast in the empty great hall. He saw Flora Delacora get up from the Ravenclaw's table and joined Cedric as he crossed beside Emma and Ian. Once not around, he find him shortly after. Harry stayed where he was. He really didn't want to go into the chamber. He had no family who would turn up to see him risk his life anyway. But just as he was getting up, thinking that he might as well go to the library and do a spot more hex research, the door of the side chamber opened and Cedric stuck his head out. Harry, come on, they are waiting for you. Utterly perplexed, Harry got up. The Dursleys couldn't possibly be here, could they? He walked across the hall and opened the door into the chamber. Cedric and his parents were just inside the door. Victor Crump was over the corner conversing with his dark-haired mother and father in rapid Bulgarian. He had inherited his father's hook nose. On the other side of the room, Flora was jabbering away in French to her mother. Flora's little sister, Gabrielle, was holding her mother's hand. She waved to Harry, who waved back, grinning. Then he saw Mrs. Weasley and Bill standing in front of the fireplace, beaming at him. Surprise, Mrs. Weasley said excitedly, as he smiled broadly and walked over her them. Thought we had come and watch you, Harry. She bent down and kissed him on the cheek. You all right? Said Bill, grinning at Harry and shaking his hand. Charlie wanted to come, but he couldn't get time off. He said you were incredible against the Horntail. Flora Della Cora, Harry noticed, was eyeing Bill with a great interest over her mother's shoulder. Harry could tell she had no objection whatsoever to long hair or earrings with fangs on them. This is really nice to you, Harry muttered to Mrs. Weasley. I thought for a moment the Dursleys, said Mrs. Weasley, pursing her lip. She had always refrained from criticizing the Dursleys in front of Harry, but her eyes flashed every time they were mentioned. It's great being back here, said Bill, looking around the chamber. Violet, the fat lady's friend, winked at him from her frame. Haven't seen his place for 5 years. Is that picture of the Mad Knight still around, Sir Cardon? Oh, yeah, said Harry, who had made Sir Cardon the previous year, and the fat lady, said Bill. She was here in my time, said Mrs. Weasley. She gave me a telling of one night when I got back in the dormitory at 4 in the morning. What were you doing out of your dormitory at 4 in the morning? Said Bill, surveying his mother with amazement. Mrs. Weasley grinned, her eyes twinkling. Your father and I had been for a night wartime stroll, she said. He got caught by Colonel Pringle. He was caretaker in those days. Your father still got marks. Fancy giving us tour, Harry said Bill. Yeah, okay, said Harry, and they made their way back toward door into the great hall as they passed Amos' degree. He looked around. There you are, he said, looking Harry up and down. But you are not feeling quite as full of yourself now. Cedric caught you up on point, are you? What? Said Harry. Ignore him, said Cedric in a low voice to Harry, following after his father. He's been angry ever since Rita's Skeeter article about the Triwizard tournament. You know, when she made out you were the only Hogwarts champion. Didn't bother to correct her, though, did he? Said Amos Diggory loudly enough for Harry to hear as he started to walk out of the door with Mrs. Weasley and Bill. Still, you'll show him, said. Beaten him once before, haven't you? Rita Skeeter goes out of her way to cause trouble, Amos, Mrs. Weasley said angrily. I would have thought you had known that working at the ministry. Mr. Diggory looked as though he was going to say something angry, but his wife laid a hand on his arm and he merely struggled and turned away. Harry had a very enjoyable morning walk over the sunny ground with Bill and Mrs. Weasley, showing them the Baxbottom carriage and Durmstrang sheep. Mrs. Weasley was intrigued by the whomping willow which had been planted after she had left the school, and remains this length about the gamekeeper before Hagrid, a man called Og. How's Percy? Harry asked as they walked around the greenhouse. Not good, said Bill. He's very upset, said Mrs. Weasley, lowering her voice and glancing around. The ministry wanted to keep Mr. Crouch's disappearance quiet. Percy's been hauled in for questioning about the instruction Mr. Crouch had been sending in. They seemed to think their chance they weren't genuinely written by him. Percy's been under a lot of strain. They are not letting him fill in for Mr. Crouch as a 50 just tonight. Cornelius Fudge is going to be doing it. They returned to the castle for lunch. Mum, Bill and said Ron, around stunned as he joined the Gryffindor table. What are you doing here? Come to watch Harry in the last task, said Mrs. Weasley brightly. I must say it makes a lovely change not having to. How was your exam? Oh, okay, said Ron. Couldn't remember all the goblins' rebels' names, so I invented a few. It's all right, he said, helping himself to Cornish pastry, while Mrs. Weasley, looking stern, they are all called stuff like Godrod and bearded and ugh and unclean. It wasn't hard. Fred, George, and Ginny came to sit next to them too, and Harry was having such a good time he felt almost as though he were back at the Burrow. He had forgotten to worry about that evening's task, and not until Hermione's turn up halfway through lunch did he remember, but she had had a brainwave about Rita Skeeter. Are you going to tell us? Hermione shook her head warningly and glanced at Mrs. Weasley. Hello, Hermione, said Mrs. Weasley, much more stiffly than usual. Hello, said Harry. Hermione, a smile flattened at the cold expression on Mrs. Weasley's face. Harry looked between them and said, Mrs. Weasley, you didn't believe that rubbish Rita Skeeter wrote in Witch Weekly, did you? Because Hermione is not my girlfriend. Oh, said Mrs. Weasley, no, of course I didn't. But she became considerably warmer toward Hermione after that. Harry, Bill, and Mrs. Weasley, while away the afternoon with a long walk around the castle, and then returned to the great hall for evening feast. Ludo Bagman and Cornelius Fudge had joined the staff table now. Bagman looked quite cheerful, but Cornelius Fudge, who was sitting next to Madame Magazine, looked stern and was not talking. Madame Maxim was concentrating on her plate, and Harry thought her eyes were red. Fred kept glancing along the table at her. There were more courses than usual, but Harry, who was starting to feel really nervous now, didn't eat much. As an enchanted ceiling over began to fade from the blue to dusky purple, Dumbledore rose to his feet at the staff table and silence fell. Ladies and gentlemen, in 5 minutes' time, I will be asking you to make your way down to the Quidditch field for the third and final task of the Triwizard Tournament. Will the champion please follow Mr. Bagman down to the stadium now? Harry got up. The Gryffindors all along the table were applauding him. The Wesleys and Hermione all wished him good luck, and he headed off out of the great hall with Cedric, Flora, and Victor. Feeling all right, Harry, Bagman asked as they went back to the stone step into the ground confident. I'm okay, said Harry. It was sort of true. He was nervous, but he kept running over all the excess and spell he had been practicing in his mind as they walked, and he knowledge that he couldn't remember them all made him feel better. They walked into the pitch field, which was now completely unrecognized. A 20-foot high hedge ran all over the way around the edge of it. There was a gap right in front of them, the entrance to the vast maze. The passage beyond it looked darker and creepy. 5 minutes later, the stands had begun to fill. The air was full of excited voices and rubbling of feet as the hundreds of students filled into their seats. The sky was deep, clear blue now, and the first stars were starting to appear. Hagrid, Professor Moody, Professor McGonagall, and Professor Flitwick came walking into the stadium into and approached Big Ben and the champions. They were wearing large red luminous stars on their hat, all except Hagrid, who had his on the back of his moccasin vest. We are going to patrolling the outside of the maze, said Professor McGonagall to the champions. If you get into difficulty and wish to be rescued, send red sparks in the air and one of us will come and get you. Do understand? The champions nodded. Off you go then, said Bagman brightly to the four patrols. Good luck, Harry, Hagrid whispered, and the four of them walked away in different directions to station themselves around the maze. Bagman now pointed his wand at the throat, muttered Snorus, and his magical magnified voice echoed into the stand. Ladies and gentlemen, the third and final task of the Triwizard Tournament is about to begin. Let me remind you now how the points currently stand. Ties in first place with 85 points each, Mr. Cedric Diggory and Mr. Harry Potter, both of Hogwarts School. The cheers had applauded, sent birds from the forbidden forest fluttering into the darkening sky. In a second place, the 8-point Mr. Victor Crumb of the Drumstick Institute, more applaud. And the third place, Miss Flora Delacour of Box Bottom Academy. Harry could just make out Miss Weasley, Bill, Ron, and Hermione applauding Flora politely. Halfway up the stand, he waved up at them, and they waved back, beaming at him. So on my whistle, Harry and Cedric, the bagman, 3, 2, 1. He gave a sort of blast on his whistle, and Harry and Cedric hurried forward into the maze. The towering hedge cast black shadow across the path, and whether because they were so tall and thick, or because they had been enchanted, the sound of the surrounding crowd was silenced the moment they entered the maze. Harry felt almost as though he were underwater again. He pulled out of his wand, muttered Lumos, and heard Cedric do the same thing behind him. After about 50 yards, they reached a fork. They looked at each other. See you, said Harry. He looked the left one, while Cedric took right. Harry heard Bagman's whistle for the second time. Crumb had entered the maze. Harry sped up. His chosen path seemed completely deserted. He turned right and hurried on, holding his wand high over the head, trying to see as far ahead as possible. Still, there was nothing in sight. Bagman's whistle blew in the distance from the third time. All of the champions were now inside. Harry kept looking behind him, the old feeling that he was being watched upon him. The maze was growing darker with every passing minute as the sky overhead deepened to navy. He reached a second four, point me, the whispered to his hand holding a flag in his palm. The wand spun around once and pointed toward his right, into solid haze that way was north, and he knew that he needed to go northeast. For the center of the maze, the best he could do was to take the failed fork and go right again as soon as possible. The path ahead was empty too, and when Harry reached the right turn and took it again, he found his way unblocked. Harry didn't know why, but the lack of obstacle was unnerving him. Surely he shouldn't have met somebody by now. He felt as though the maze were luring him into the false sense of security. Then he heard movement right behind him. He felt out his wand ready to attack, but its beam fell only upon Cedric, who had just hurried out of the path on the right hand side. Cedric took several shaken. The sleeve of his robe was smoking. Hagrid's blast ended. Scrooge, he hissed, they are enormous. I only just got away. He looked his head and dived out of sight along another path, keen to put plenty distance between himself and Scrooge. Harry hurried off again. Then, as he turned a corner, he saw a Dementor gliding toward him, 12 feet tall, his face hidden by the hood, its rooting scab-handed outreach in advance, sensing it way blindly toward him. Harry could hear its rattling breath. He felt calmly coldness stealing over him, but knew what he had to do. He summoned the happiest thought he could, concentrate with all his might as on thought of getting out of the maze and celebrating with Ron and Hermione, raising his wand and cried Expecto Patronum. A silver stag erupted from the light of Harry's wand and galloped toward Dementor, which fell back and tripped over the hem of his robe. Harry had never seen Dementor's trouble. Hang on, he shouted, advancing in the wake of his silver patronum. Your Bogart. Ridiculous. There was a loud crack of the shape shifter upward in a wave of smoke. The silver stars faded from sight. Harry wished it could have stayed. He could have used some company, but he moved on quickly and quietly as possible, listening hard, his wand held high once more. Left, right, left again. Twice he found himself facing dead end. He did the 4-point spell again and found that he was going too far east. He turned back, took a right turn and saw an odd golden mist floating ahead of him. Harry approached it cautiously, pointing the wand beamed at him. This looked like some kind of enchantment. He wondered whether he might be able to blast it out of the way. Reducto, he said, the spell spots straight through the mist, leaving the intact. He supposed he should have known better. The reductor curse was for solid object. What would happen if he walked through the mist? Was it worth changing it to could be double back? He was still hesitating with a scream shattered in silence. Flora, Harry yelled. There was a silence. He stared all around. What had happened to her? Her scream seemed to have come from somewhere ahead. He took a deep breath and ran through the enchanted mist. The world turned upside down. Harry was hanging from the ground, with his hair on end, on glasses dangling off his nose, threatening to fall into the bloomless sky. He clutched them to the end of his nose and hung there terrified. It felt as though his feet were glued to the grass, which had now become the ceiling below him. The dark stars spangled heaven stretched endless. He felt as though if he tried to move one of his feet, he would fall away from the company. Think, he told himself as all the blood rushed into his head. Think, but Not one of the spell he had practiced had been designed to combat a sudden reversal of ground and sky. Did he dare move his feet? He could hear a blood pounding in his ears. He had two choices: try and move, or send up red spark and get rescued and disqualified from the task. He shut his eyes so wouldn't be able to see the view of endless space below him and pull his right foot as hard as he could away from the grassy ceiling. Immediately the world lightened itself. Harry fell toward onto his knees into the wonderful solid ground. He felt temporarily limp with shock. He took a deep, steady breath, then got up again and hurried forward, looking back over his shoulder, and he ran away from the golden mist which twinkled innocently at him in the moonlight. He paused at a junction of two paths and looked around for some sign of Flora. He was sure it had been she who had screamed. What had she made? Was she all right? There was no sign of red spark. Did that mean she had got herself out of trouble, or was she in such trouble that she couldn't reach her wand? Harry took the right fork, the feeling of increasing unease, but at the same time he couldn't help thinking one champion down Tom was somewhere close by, and it sounded as though Flora was no longer in running. He had got this far, hadn't he? What if he actually managed to beat victory? And for the first time since he had found himself champion, he saw again the image of himself rising with Charizard up in front of the rest of the school. He made nothing for 10 minutes but kept turning into dead end. Twice he looked the same wrong turning. Finally he found a new route and started a jog along it. His one light waving, making his shadow flicker and distorted on the hedge wall. Then he rounded another corner and found himself facing a blast-ended Scrooge. Cedric was right. It was enormous, 10 feet long. It looked more like a giant scorpion than anything. Its looked sighting was curled over the black. Its like armor gleamed in the light of Harry's wand, which was pointed at Stuffy. The spell hit the Scrooge's armor and rebounded. Harry ducked just in time, but could smell burning air. It had signed the top of his head. The Scrooge issued a blast of fire into the air and flew forward toward him. Impedimenta! Harry yelled. The spell hit the Scrooge's armor again and record off. Harry staggered back a few paces and fell over impedimenta. The Scrooge was inch from him when it froze. He had managed to hit on its fleshy, shell-less, undazzled, panting. Harry pushed himself away from and ran hard in opposite direction. The impetuous curse was not permanent. Scrooge would be regaining the use of its leg at any moment. He took the left path and hit a dead end, a right and hit another, forcing himself to stop, hurt, hammering, and perform Flora 4-point spell again. He performed the 4-point spell again. Backtracker choose the path that will take him northwest. He had been hurrying along the new path for a few minutes when he heard something in the path running parallel to his own that made him stop dead. What are you doing? Yelled Cedric's voice. What the hell do you think you are doing? And then Harry heard Crumb's voice. Crucio! The air was suddenly full of Cedric's yell. Horrified, Harry began sprinting up his path, trying to find the way to Cedric's. When none appeared, he tried reluctant curse again. It wasn't very efficient, but it burned a small hole in the hedge through which Harry forced his legs, kicked at the thick bramble and branches until they broke and made an opening. They struggled through it, training his ropes and looking to right, saw Cedric jerking and twitching on the ground, Crumb standing over him. Harry pulled himself up and pointed his wand at Crumb just as Crumb looked up. Crumb turned and began to run. Stupefy! Harry yelled. The spell hit Crumb in the back. He stopped dead and his stack. fell forward and lay motionless, face down and grass. Harry dashed over to Cedric, who had stopped twitching and was lying there, panting, his hand over his face. Are you alright? Harry said roughly, grabbing Cedric's arm. Yeah, panted Cedric. Yeah, I don't believe it. He crept up behind me. I heard him. I turned around and he had his wand on me. Cedric got up. He was still shaking. He and Harry looked down at Crump. I cannot believe this. I thought he was all right, Harry said, staring at Crump. So did I, said Cedric. Do you hear Flora scream earlier? Said Harry. Yeah, said Cedric. You don't think Crump saw her too? I don't know, said Harry slowly. Should we leave him here? Cedric muttered. No, said Harry. I reckon we shouldn't let send up Red Sprang. Some will come and collect him. Otherwise, he'll probably be eaten by Scrooge. He deserved it, Cedric muttered, but all the same, he raised his wand and shot a shower of red sprangs into the air, which hovered high above Crump, marking the spot where he lay. Harry and Cedric stood there in the darkness for the moment, looking around them. Then Cedric said, well, I suppose we had better go on. What said Ron? Harry, oh, you're right. It was an odd moment. He and Cedric had been briefly united against Crumb. Now, the fact that they were opponents came back to Harry. The two of them proceeded up the dark path without speaking. Then Harry turned left and Cedric right. Cedric's footsteps soon died away. Harry moved on, continued to use 4-point spell, making sure he was moving in the right direction. It was between him and Cedric now. His desire to reach the curve first was now burning stronger than ever. But he couldn't hardly believe that he had just seen Crumb do the use of unforgivable curse on a fellow human being meant a lifetime in Azkaban. That was what Moody had told them. Crumb surely couldn't have wanted Sky Wizard come that badly. Harry sped up. Every so often he hit more dead ends, but the increase in darkness made him feel sure he was getting near the heart of the maze. Then he strode down a long straight path. He saw a moment once again, and his beam of one light hit an extraordinary creature, one of which he had seen in pictures from the monster books monsters. It was Sphinx. It had a body of ore, long iron, great clawed paw, and a long yellowish tail ending in the brown tuft. Its head, however, was that of a woman. She turned her long almond-shaped eyes upon Harry as he approached. He raised his hand hesitant. She was not crouching as if to spring, but pacing from side to side of the path, blocking his progress. Then she looked in deep horror's voice. You are very near your goal. The quickest way is past me. So will you move, please? Said Harry, knowing that the answer was going to be no. She said, continuing to please. Not useless. You can answer my riddle. Answer on your first guess. I let you pass. Answer wrongly. I attack. Remain silent. I will let you walk away from the unscattered. Harry's stomach slipped several notches. It was Hermione who was good at this sort of thing, not him. He weighed his chance. If the riddle was too hard, he could keep silent, get away from the Sphinx unharmed, and try to find an alternate route to the center. Okay, he said. Can I hear the riddle? The Sphinx sat down upon her hind legs in the very middle of the path and recited. First thing of the person who lived in disgust, who deal in a secret and tell naught but lies. Next tell me what always he last thing to mend, the middle of and end of the end. And finally give me the sound often heard during the search of hard to find words. Now string them together and answer me this, which creature would you be unwilling to kiss? Harry gaped at her. Could I have it again? More slowly, he asked tentatively. She blinked at him, smiled, and repeated the poem. All the clues add up to a creature I wouldn't want to kiss? Harry asked. She merely smiled, her mysterious smile. Harry took that for yes. Harry cast his mind around. There were plenty of animals he wouldn't want to kiss. His immediate thought was blast ended, screwed. But something told him that wasn't the answer. He had how to try and work out the clue. A person in disguise, Harry muttered, staring at her. Whose lies? That's be an impostor. No, that's not my guess. A spy. I'll come back to that. Could you give me the next clue again, please? She repeated the next line of poem. The last thing to mend, Harry repeated. Oh, no idea. Middle of middle. Could I have the last beat again? She gave him the last four line. She sound often heard during the search of a hard to find word, said Harry. That's be, hang on, a sound. The Sphinx smiled at him. Spy, a spy, said Harry, pacing up and down. A creature I wouldn't want to kiss, a spider. The Sphinx smiled more broadly. She got up, stretched her front leg, and then moved aside from him fast. Thanks, said Harry, and amazed at his own brilliance. He dashed forward and had to be close now. He had to be his wand. I was telling him he was bang on, of course. As long as he didn't mean anything horrible, he might have a chance. Harry broke into a run. He had a choice of a path ahead. Point me, he whispered again to his wand, and it spun around and pointed him to a right hand one. He dashed up this one and saw light ahead. A Triwizard Cup was gleaming on a blinked 100 yards again. Suddenly, a dark figure hurtled onto the path in front of him. Cedric was going to get there first. Cedric was sprinting as fast as he could forward the cup, and Harry knew he would never catch up. Cedric was much taller and much longer leg. Then Harry saw something immense over the edge of his speed moving quickly along the path that intersected with his own. It was moving so fast Cedric was about to run into it. And Cedric, his eyes on Cup, had not seen it. Cedric, Harry bellowed. On your left. Cedric looked around just in time and hurled himself past and think and avoid colliding with it. But in his head he tripped. Harry saw Cedric wand fly out of his hand and was giant spider stabbed into the path and began to bear down upon Cedric's stupefied. Harry yelled. The spell hit the spider gigantic hairy black body, but for all the good he did he might as well have thrown a stone at it. The spider jerked, scuttered around, and ran at Harry instead. Superify, impedimenta, superify, but it was no use. The spider was either so large or so magical, and the spell were no more than aggravation. It Harry had one horrifying glimpse at its shining black eye and razor sharp pincers before he was upon him. He was lifted into the air in front of leg, struggled madly. He tried to kick it, his leg connected with the pincers, and next moment he was in excruciating pain. He could have Cedric yelling, "Stupefy too," but his spell had no more effect than Harry's. Harry raised his wand and Spider opened, pressing once more and shouted, "Exprimus!" It worked. The disarming spell made the spider drop him, but that meant that Harry fell 12 feet onto his already injured leg, which crumbled beneath him without pausing to think. He aimed high at the spider unbearably, as he had done with Scrooge, and shouted "Stupefy!" just as Cedric yelled the same thing. The two spells combined did what one alone had not. The spider kneeled over sideways, flattening the nearby hedge and screwing the path with a tangled and hairy leg. "Harry," he heard Cedric shouting. "You all right? Did it fall on you?" "No," Harry called back, panting. He looked down at his leg. It was bleeding freely. It come, see some sort of thin gluey secretion from the spider's pincers from his torn robes. He tried to get up, but his leg was shaking badly and did not want to support his weight. He leaned against the hedge, gasping for breath, and looked around. Cedric was standing feet from Travis's cup, which was gleaming behind him. Take it, Harry panted to Cedric. Go on, take it. You are there. But Cedric didn't move. He merely stood there looking at Harry, then he turned to stare at the cup. Harry saw the longing expression on his face in its golden light. Cedric looked around at Harry again, who was now holding onto the hedge to support himself. Cedric took a breath. You take it. You should win. That's twice you have saved my neck in here. That's not how it's supposed to work, Harry said. He felt angry. His leg was very painful. He was itching all over from trying to throw off the spider, and after all this effort, Cedric had beaten him to it, just as he had beaten Harry to ask Cho to the ball. The one who reached the curve first get the point. That's you. I'm telling you, I'm not going to win any races on this race. Cedric took a few paces nearer to the stunned spider, away from the cup, shaking his head. No, he said. Stop being noble, said Harry irritably. Just take it, then we can get out of here. Cedric watched Harry steadying himself, holding tight to Hedge. You told me about the dragon, Cedric said. I wouldn't have gone down in the first task if you hadn't told me what was coming. I had help on that too. Harry sniffed, trying to mop up his bloody leg and his robe. You helped me with the egg. We are square. I had helped you on the egg in the first place, said Cedric. We are still square. But Harry, testing his leg gingerly, it looked violently as he put weight on it. He had sprained and his ankle when the spider had dropped him. You shouldn't have got more point on the second task, said Cedric musely. You stayed behind to get all the hostage. I should have done that. I was the only one who was thinking enough to take the song seriously, and Harry bitterly just take the cup. No, said Cedric. He stepped over the spider tangled leg to join Harry, who stared at him. Cedric was serious. He was walking away from the sort of glory Hufflepuff House hadn't had in centuries. Go on, Cedric said. He looked as though this was costing him every ounce of resolution he had, but his face was set, his arms were folded. It seemed decided. Harry looked from Cedric to the cup for one shining moment. He saw himself emerging from the maze holding it. He saw himself holding the Triwizard Cup aloft. Heard the roar of the crowd, saw Chao's face shining with admiration more clearly than he had ever seen it before. And then the picture faded, and he found himself staring at Cedric's shadowy, stubborn face. Both of us, Harry said. What? We'll take it, and at the same time, it's still a Hogwarts victory. We'll tie for it. Cedric stared at Harry. He unfolded his arm. You're sure? Yes, said Harry. We have helped each other out of, haven't we? We both got there. Let's just take it together. For a moment, Cedric looked as though he couldn't believe his ear. Then his face filled in green. You are on, he said. Come here. He grabbed Harry's arm below the shoulder and helped Harry limp toward pin where its cup stood. Then they had reached it and both held hand onto one of the cup gleaming handle. Oh, three, dear, right, said Harry. 1, 2, 3. He and Cedric both grasped handle. Instantly, Harry felt a jerk somewhere behind his navel. His feet had left the ground. He could not unclench the hand holding the Triwizard Cup. He was pulling himself onward, the howl of wind and swirling color. Cedric at his side. That's it for today. Thank you so much. Stay tuned for next chapter. Till then, see ya. Bye bye.